If you shoot an AR-9, there's a very good chance that this system will change everything you know about recoil and safety. Welcome to Pork Tactical. So this is the Gentle Recoil System developed by Blowback9, and this system consists of 4 distinct elements. So element number 1 is a buffer with a heavy mass. So when we say heavy, we're talking anywhere from 11 to 12 ounces, so that when it's paired with a heavy bolt and some spacers, you hit somewhere between 22 and 24 ounces in total. Number 2, reciprocating weights to mitigate bolt bounce. That's these items right here. Number 3, a dampening or cushioning element for rearward end of travel buffer tube impact. So that is where the hydraulic piece comes in. And number 4, as he defines it, a flat wire spring for quieter functioning. Now that's the one difference. Well, there's 2 small differences, but the spring is one of the differences in my system. I'm actually using a 223 heavy duty spring called a red spring. I'm not using a flat wire spring. That doesn't really have any difference or anything to do with the actual functionality of the system. It's more from a resonance perspective. And so what this system does is it controls the recoil impulse curve and the bolt velocity. So what happens is this system delays the bolt slightly, and it absorbs some of the violent energy that is pushed back into the buffer tube. So what happens is when the bolt hits the buffer, the internal weights lag slightly behind for a split second, and that lag helps spread out the recoil impulse over time. So it's very similar to a shock absorber in a car. It also slows down the bolt's rearward travel just enough to reduce bolt bounce. The net effect then is a smoother, softer shooting experience, especially noticeable with the suppressed setup like I run. So a way to think about this is, think about this like slamming a door. So a regular buffer is like slamming a door that hits the frame with a really loud bang. This setup with this dead blow buffer setup is like slamming a door that has a slow close hinge. It's the same action, but it actually dampens the motion and closes it more gently. Okay, so let's talk specifics. So Blowback9 recommends a mass of 11 ounces. He also then recommends a buffer tube, an extended buffer tube. So this is the JRE 8.5 inch extended buffer tube. And the reason we need the extended buffer tube is so that we have space for these reciprocating weights. He also recommends the KindShot hydraulic RB5015HD. Now the one that I'm running is slightly different. The one I'm running is the RB5007. And then he also recommends a flat wire spring, whereas in my setup, I'm specifically running the Spinco 223 carbine extra power buffer spring, or often called a red spring. Now, this is just a slight variance in his official recommendation. And the reason that I went for this spring and buffer combination is because this is the way that Blitzkrieg sells them as a package, specifically for AR-9s with a 5 to 8 inch barrel length. And so that's why I went with this setup. Now, for some of you who might have seen some of my other videos, you will recall me saying that I wasn't able to actually get this system running properly. So what was happening was, when I ran this system previously, my trigger wouldn't reset when I was shooting 147 grain ammo with a suppressor. I would pull the trigger and everything else would reset except for the trigger. It would sort of get stuck and I would need to push it forward. So what I did was I then took this all apart. I put in the regular buffer tube and I used the Macon Armory dead blow buffer with a regular spring, and everything worked fine. So I just assumed then that it had something to do with the hydraulic buffer, because every time I put the hydraulic buffer system in, the trigger wouldn't reset. As it turns out, I actually had a problem with my CMC trigger, And once I fixed that issue with my trigger, I was then able to put in the extended buffer tube and put the system back in, and now it works flawlessly. So this is a bit of an experimentation, and your system might vary slightly depending on your specific needs. So let's talk about two of the biggest reasons that I think that this Gentle Recoil System is a really smart upgrade for AR-9s: safety and shootability. Blowback PCCs like the AR-9, they don't use a locking mechanism like traditional rifles do. There's no rotating bolt or delay system. It's just mass and spring tension. So this makes them very simple, but it also introduces a risk. If the bolt doesn't fully close before the trigger is pulled, you can get an out-of-battery detonation.
Now let's take a look at what happens when you have an out-of-battery discharge. You don't want one of these, trust me. This has happened to me. I have some other videos that talk about this in depth and how to prevent it, so check those out if you're interested.
And that's where the Gentle Recoil System comes in. It adds a hydraulic buffer and spacer weights and a tuned spring to slow down the bolt's movement. So by delaying the rearward travel and softening the return to battery, it gives the cartridge time to fully seat into the chamber before ignition. The result? Well, safer ignition dynamics, less stress on the internal components, and way lower risk of a catastrophic malfunction. But the magic of the Gentle Recoil System, it doesn't stop at just safety. It also makes the AR-9 shoot way softer and a lot more fun to shoot. By reducing the bolt speed, you're actually smoothing out the recoil impulse. So instead of the bolt slamming back hard and fast, the energy is spread out over time. So think of it like going from a punch to a firm push. That's the difference. So the softer recoil means that you're going to get less wear on optics and mounting hardware. You're going to get less malfunctions from bolt bounce or from magazine timing issues, and you're going to get a lot faster, more accurate follow-up shots. It actually makes spending a lot of time at the range way more enjoyable. You get less fatigue, it's less jarring, it's a lot less smoother shooting overall. And if you're trying to get somebody new introduced to shooting, like let's say you want to get your wife into shooting, giving her this system that's a lot easier on the shoulder is going to really pay off for you. So yeah, the Gentle Recoil System really reduces recoil. But maybe more importantly, it slows everything down just enough to make your AR-9 safer and more reliable without having to sacrifice performance. Okay, so let's take a step back and talk about how most AR-9s are set up from the factory, and frankly, how most DIY builders end up building their systems. So the typical setup is actually super simple. It is a heavy bolt carrier group paired with a very stiff recoil spring. And that's how the platform delays the bolt from moving rearward too soon after firing. So it's basically just a brute force method. And to be fair, it actually works pretty well. So there are pros to being very simple and being brute force. It's simple and it's reliable and has very few moving parts. You don't need a gas system or any kind of locking lugs to tune. It's just mass and spring tension. That's it. But that simplicity comes at a cost. The bolt slams to the back with a lot of force, especially when you're shooting hotter loads or shooting suppressed. And you end up with a very harsh recoil. And that harsh recoil increases the wear on the lower receiver. It leads to what's called bolt bounce, where the bolt doesn't settle consistently into battery before you take the next shot. And so that harsh recoil and bolt bounce is not just uncomfortable, it can actually mess with the reliability and even accuracy when you're doing like a fast rate of fire. The Gentle Recoil System takes a much more elegant, controlled approach. So instead of relying on brute force, it uses a tuned resistance, a combination of spacer weights, a hydraulic buffer, and a purpose-matched spring. And what this does is it slows down and smooths the entire bolt cycle from back to front. It's kind of like going from a sledgehammer to a really well-balanced flywheel. You have the same amount of energy, but it's spread out more intelligently. The bottom line is the standard setup works, but it's really crude. And this gentle recoil system gives you control. And that control translates to better recoil, better reliability, and just a better shooting experience overall. For those of you that have seen my build videos for this gun, you'll know that I'm running the 5.5 inch Macon Armory barrel. And in testing, I've been using 147 grain Phoenix ammunition with an Obsidian 9. Now, in my opinion, this system is amazing. I got my wife a CMM Banshee with the radial delayed blowback, and that's a pretty nice gun, and it's soft shooting. But to be honest, this thing is even more soft shooting than the Banshee. It's unbelievable. From a reliability perspective, I have had zero issues. I put hundreds of rounds now through this system, and I haven't had any issues at all. And to be honest, with the exception of possibly the hydraulics failing, I wouldn't really expect many issues because, you know, it's not a super complicated system. Sure, it's more complicated than just a super heavy bolt and a high tension spring, but all it is really is the hydraulics and then the extra spacer weights. Even coming from the Macon Armory the dead blow buffer system to this was a noticeable difference, even better than that. And I had already thought that the dead blow setup was pretty nice. So, you know, this made it even softer and even nicer. I definitely think that this is worth the effort, really, for anybody that wants a better shooting 9mm AR-9, because it's basically a drop-in replacement. You don't actually need to have the extended buffer tube and these spacer weights. You could do this with just from taking a standard buffer and adding a standard buffer tube and adding a hydraulic buffer to the mix. You would improve your system. Adding the weights just makes it that much better. So in reality, you wouldn't even need to change out your buffer tube. You could just get the hydraulic and the spring. It's a drop-in replacement. It will take you a minute to swap it out, and very, very worth it.
Well, thanks for watching. If you like the content, please do me a favor and like and subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Tell me, have you tried the Gentle Recoil System? What's your experience been like? Thanks so much.